Good morning, traders. I'm Dennis Dick.
And I'm Joel Elconin. Welcome to Premarket Info.
You sound a little hoarse there this morning, Joel. I heard you were at a big basketball game over the weekend.
Yeah, getting ready for March Madness a little bit early. Went to the Michigan State basketball game, and the Wolverines pulled it out. But just beginning in March, so I'm going to be sounding a lot worse by the end of the month.
Getting pumped up for the college hoops. Market overnight, we had a significant sell-off here. When I went to bed last night, we were down 8 points on the S&P. Wake up this morning, we're only down 5.5. Then Warren gets on CNBC. We kind of had a little Warren rally in the last hour. We were down around 15.11. It's rallied 4 or 5 points since he's been on CNBC.
Right. Well, you had the old government come to agreement on Friday. I thought that would really be good news and have big follow through the upside. And then you had some weak Chinese data overnight. Make a long story short, we're only a couple points from the close, which was 14.1650. We're just running into problems here. We're hanging up at the top, Dennis, but we just can't seem to bust through and bust out of this 1425 to 1430
15.
area.
Your handles are all messed
Yeah,
up here this
15,
morning.
50.
I'll sell it to you. I'll
That's
buy it from
right.
you at 1400, 1420. Yeah, we've
Right here.
consolidated. Obviously, Friday we had the big sell-off early, and then we rallied late. And then overnight we've had a big range too here. So we are finding support in that whole 1500 area, and we've been finding resistance up here around this 1520 to 1524 area. That continues to remain the trade, I guess, until it doesn't work anymore. So really, I guess you play it. When we get up here another 4 or 5 points, it starts to find resistance again. Moving on to the stocks here, though, Joel. What about Apple? Did take out that key 435 number on Friday, broke down, is down here again today. This stock seems to go down whether the market goes up. It seems to go down whether the market goes down. It's just completely out of favor. We've been talking about that head and shoulders. Go back to that other chart just for a second there. We've been talking about this head and shoulders pattern forming for the last 3 or 4 days on the show. Obviously, now it's coming to fruition as the stock is starting to get some downside momentum going and a key breakdown through that neckline on Friday.
Right, you did take out that low of the move, 435.86. So if you are playing this from the short side, that's an area that if you close back above that 435.86 level, you may want to look for an exit. Also, should be good resistance to first pop up. Looking at the charts over the weekend here, going back to this area right here. Going back to January 2012, I don't know how many people can remember back then. But you had multiple lows in the 418, 419 level. That's another 10 points away from here. You also have a gap to fill, believe it or not, from January, same month, down to 425.10. So levels on the downside to look at in Apple, 425.10. And then the 419, I really like that area as support as well.
Yeah, it's hard to say when the stock is eventually going to get into favor. It's all sentiment. That's what we've been talking about. The market trades on sentiment anymore. It seems like valuation simply doesn't matter in a lot of cases. You can look like a stock like an Amazon that continues to rise despite obviously having a ridiculously high multiple. And you can look at a stock like Apple that continues to fall despite being fundamentally cheap. So, valuation really isn't the way to trade. It's always on sentiment. And when stocks are out of favor, they can remain out of favor for a long time. The market can remain irrational much longer than we can remain solvent. So always keep that in mind and never get too heavy in one specific issue. And I think a lot of people are learning that the hard way in Apple as the stock continues to roll over. Google here, though, Joel, different story again. We've been talking about how this separation has happened 6 months ago between Google and Apple. Continues to flirt with this 808 area. On Friday, again, we got up to 807.14. We closed fairly strong at 806.19. We're down $1 here this morning, but is this winding up to eventually take out that 808 high?
You've had two consecutive closes over the 800 level, so that's definitely a good sign for the stock. Another one today, and boy, it'd be hard to take it under there. But look at, you had the 807.14 high. You also had an 808.41 high on the 25th, and then an 808.97 high on the 20th. So
Lots of highs.
You got multiple highs there, down a little bit in the pre-market there. Once we go through 808.97, every short's going to be underwater here, so you get a little bit of scramble. But if you're playing this like on a breakout, and it does break out over that 809, 810 area, don't fall in love with it. Especially if you're day trading, just keep moving your stop up because something happens in the spoos or some analyst comes out intraday, and with this little liquidity, it can just give a lot back very quickly.
Yeah, you got to be careful when you've had a stock that's had an extended move like a Google. It's up basically 130 points really since the start of the year, and actually since just the middle of January, it's up. Well, yeah, around there. It's up about 100 points since the start of the year, 110. So it's had an extended run. A lot of people, it is in favor right now. Exact opposite of Apple. The sentiment on Google has been strong. It's hard to fade that from a short perspective, but you do have reference points. Like we always say, you can put on any trade as long as you have a reference point. That 808.97 high that you're talking about is probably the bogey on the upside. And obviously on the downside, 800 remains a big psychological level. Facebook had a big day on Friday there, Joel. Stock rallied up towards the afternoon. It was kind of just trading and hanging out, and then in the afternoon it got a nice lift. Popped about 50 cents, 70 cents there in the afternoon. Got actually up over 28 bucks again, closed at 27.78, and is up 12 cents here again this morning. So what do you think? This Facebook, you were saying this is a hard one to figure out, eh?
Yeah, well, 28.12 was Friday's high. We're trading up a little bit in the pre-market, so I use that as a resistance point. The high so far in the pre-market has been 27.97, so you are finding resistance there. Since the stock had earnings, I mean, it disappointed. It's been selling off here. That's a weekly. This was the earnings. I guess the longer term, what I'm looking at in this thing before I think get really interested on the long side, you had a move from 17.55 up to 32.51. A very, a huge rally for the stock after getting the tar kicked out of it after the IPO. But I'd really like to see it come down to this 25 level. That would mark the 50% retracement. Find a little consolidation there. So that's where it would pique some interest from me, to enter on the long side.
Yeah, you had a low even on February 28th at 25.15, so that would coincide nicely with an old low that we had there too. We couldn't quite get there 2 days ago. We got down to 26.34, and boom, boom, a day and a half, or even a day later, and we're up in a dollar and a half from that low. So it is a tricky one to figure out. It seems like every time it starts to look like, oh, it's starting to look weak on the charts, it gets a spike up. So this is just a tough one to trade. That's for sure. Few stocks in the Big Ten you want to highlight here before we get into the news stocks. Exxon Mobil has been consolidating, had an inside day on Friday, consolidating right under this $90 area. Been finding some resistance up in the upper 89s.
Yeah, what I want to point out on that is you've had three closes in this stock between 89.32 and 89.55, closing right on the kisser there, right in the middle, 89.43 on Friday. Also a potential double top here, 89.68 to 81. So that 90 level is just getting to be, major resistance, and just correlate with that, that 15.20, 15.25 area in the spoos, So keep using that $90 area as major resistance. Do you have any major size kicking around in the
Nah,
book
because it's
there?
cut
Is it
through
too
it.
far?
It cut
Yeah.
through it like 3, 4 days ago. So I think he did take out most of the institutional. There's a little bit of size there, 20,000 shares in the book on New York, but that's not that much to cut through for Exxon Mobil. So I think it's just a big psychological barrier, and I think you've got a lot of short-term traders using it as an exit point. It gets into the upper 89s, and they're using that level as a key psychological barrier, and it's starting to become a technical barrier too, because the more highs it makes up in the 89 area, the more relevant the number becomes.
Right, and then you got just all the host of lows under the $88 level, providing major support. So sell-off comes into play. Keep an eye on that $88 level. You look at that, and then you look at Chevron Corporation, and that's just bumping up here against that 117 level. Has popped through it a few times, settled under it. Longer term, I mean, this stock is almost back at all-time highs.
Yep.
I mean, I think we all remember when we came into this 118.50 level. but seems to be getting a little tired here around the 117 level. So I'd still keep an eye on that as major resistance.
Maybe just catching a breather here. Obviously, for the last month, we've consolidated really in a 2.5 point range here from the 114 to 117 area. So, I mean, this is just eventually going to break one way or the other, and you got to kind of wait unless you're just playing that range. But if you're looking at buying the stock, I'd probably wait till it starts to break out if I was going to buy the stock. Microsoft, you talked about
Yeah.
there on Friday, Joel. We might as well talk about it again. This stock just finds resistance in the 28 area. It closed strong on Friday, but closed right up just under that $28, 27.95.
Yeah, you actually have three consecutive highs between 27.97 and 28 even, trading down a few cents, so maybe the fourth time would be the charm. But then you just can't get too excited if it gets through 28, got another high at 28.05. But we have been talking about this 28.23 level forever and a brother here. All these are weekly highs here, bumping up against that. I'm not really sure what it's going to take to get this stock out through that area, but until it busts through and kicks you in the teeth on the short side, you have to use it as major resistance.
We do have a few stocks in the news, and let's go to them. You have the one 3D system, S3D printing system, Stratasys, SSYS, which reported earnings here this morning, and it is trading up. Go to the SSYS one, Joel. We'll talk about the DDD after. But SSYS reported earnings 40 cents versus 37. They see earnings in the next quarter $1.80 to $1.95, or for the full year $1.80 to $1.95 versus $1.89. The revenue blew the numbers away. If this is right, 71 million against estimates of 53 million or 52 million. So SSYS getting a nice lift here in the pre-market this morning. It's up over $7.
Yeah, I'm a buyer over 65.
Our buyer, that 65 level was huge. Bring up the pre-market chart so these guys can see what's
Okay.
happening here this morning. These guys got a
Wow.
huge lift in the stock.
Yeah, I mean 72.90 is what it hit. Been pulling since then. Since you've hit the 72.90, 71 has been bid support. I will call that as minor support as you've ever find on this show because you take out 71 and who knows where this thing is going. But you have to go to the dailies here to find some resistance in this chart here. We've blown through this area right here. We'll take a look at this high, 71.77. After you get through that, then you get into this whole vacuum area. But the reference points would be 71.77. We're trading just below that, 72.90. And then if this thing is just going to run like a banshee here, you do have a major top at 75.50. But I don't think we're going to see that today.
Triple D, DDD 38.72, trading up in sympathy, obviously, with the SSSY or with the SSYS earnings. It's getting into a vacuum area here too, Joel, because it gapped down on its last earnings report, obviously, and with the whole had the stock split actually in there too, but it did gap down that day
Yeah.
as well. But breaking out here and getting back into a whole little vacuum area as well.
39 and a quarter is what we've hit in the pre-market. Just have a couple straight ticks after that. I use 38.50 as minor support. In this stock, what did they do? They do a 3 for 2 on this day.
Yeah,
They announced poor earnings, and like people, it was like trading with a blindfold on.
yeah, it's
And
real hard with levels.
they ripped the tar out of this thing. This $38 level, I mean, we have traded above it in the pre-market, 38.29. You got to imagine that anybody just got caught in this little debacle here when we traded down to
$30.
30.28. Man, they're saying $38 might not be looking like too bad of an exit
I like
there,
the 40
but
number better because we're trading 38.86 right now, so we're slowly lifting here in the pre-market. And just to get those big, different handle, you had that big 4 up there. I think the $40 area I like a little bit better from a resistance standpoint. But this is a stock here that had a hell of a lot of interest if you go back, and basically flying high. Obviously doing the 3 for 2 stock split, and then the disappointing earnings that they had just from a week and a half ago knocked it down a bit. But sentiment can change back on this thing in a hurry, and this SSYS is obviously helping it a lot this morning.
I know you don't like me. What do these companies do?
These are all the 3D systems, so there's 3D
Uh,
printing.
okay,
So, and that's the big
okay.
thing. This is the 3D printing. I mean, we were talking. I was reading an article, and not that these companies are doing, but that they're doing 3D printing on cars. They're doing, potentially they're doing 3D printing on a lot of different things. It's phenomenal technology. So, going forward, I was actually talking to a buddy of mine just over the weekend. He has a company. They make rings for like championship teams and stuff like that. And he just bought a 3D printer as well. It costs $50,000, believe it or not. But he says it's great. They can use that. They make the mold out of wax. It makes it quicker. Obviously, the cost of the technology is a lot, but for companies, that make are making that major investment like that, it can actually help in their production in a lot of different ways. So there is interest in a lot of different areas for these things, and he thinks it is a future. And it's got a good future in a lot of these companies too. Obviously, the multiples are quite high, so you always got to remember when you're paying for these companies. But fundamentally speaking, my buddy really likes them. So
All
um,
right, good to see you read something besides comic books.
besides comic books or sports. We got a couple other ones moving here this morning. Rig reported earnings are Transocean, RIG. They beat 91 cents against estimates of 82. They're getting a pretty decent lift here in the pre-market. They're up almost $2 at 53.89.
Wow. And then this doesn't look like it really wants to pull back at all here.
Just
We've
keeps
got up to
lifting.
53.92. Just hanging up here, up a buck 77. Looking at the daily here, you had a gap down, folks. So you're looking at a gap fill situation here. You had a low on February 20th at 54.17. We're bumping up against that. So that's going to be your first resistance point. And after that 54-17, be trying to gain some ground here back on this real bad day that it had on the 20th when it made a high at 56.21. But once again here, you got a situation where, you had stock drop down to 50 bucks
4 days ago.
4 days ago after being high at 59.50 coming back. You got that 50% retracement area right here at the 54.50 level. So I'm looking at to be pretty good resistance this
And
morning.
you got a low right there of 54.92 from, just trying to grab the date here, February the 6th. So call that whole area $55. Looks pretty big to me on the chart too. I know we cut through it there relatively quickly, you could say on the 20th, but we did have a low back there, and $55 could be a psychological number for that one as well. Hess actually has a whole bunch of news here this morning, announcing a transformation. This was talked about before, but announcing a transformation into pure play exploration and production company. So they got a little plan there they had talked about splitting the company up before. If we went back, well, you can see the gap up in the chart when the stock rallied basically from $59 up into 70. It was when they were initially talking about exploring some of these plans. Well, I guess they got a little bit more of a significant plan out here this morning and talking details about this. Also announcing, reported by Benzinga, $4 billion stock buyback here. So Hess is getting a good lift this morning, up $2.50.
Yeah, we were as high as 70.30 in the pre-market. We've sold off since then. After making that high, you did have a spike down here to the 68 level, but really seem to be consolidating around 69. Going to the daily here, the 68. I mean, that was providing a major resistance in the middle of February. We have busted through that. On a pullback, you get back to that 68 area, that would be your first level of support. And then the day after the other announcements they had, the recent high of the move at 70.77.
Big number. That's 70.77. Merck getting an upgrade at Bank America. It's not a stock we've talked about in a while on the show, so we might as well make a quick mention on Merck here. Basically had a nice run up there about a week and a half ago. It's found some consolidation and been consolidating in the whole 42.5 area. It is getting a lift this morning. Bank America likes the stocks as basically that the other pharmaceutical companies have been running. They feel like the gap between, because this company really hasn't participated, is intriguing now, and they think obviously that Merck might be in a good play here going forward.
Uh, big move here for a stock that trades a ton of volume. Let's take a look at the pre-market activity on this upgrade. You have bounced over, got above the $43 level, hit a high of 43.10, folks. But let's go to the daily here, and you got some good reference points here. 43.15 and 43.21 were the highs on Wednesday and Thursday. So you are opening up into some major resistance here in Merck. So keep an eye on that level. If you're looking to pair some longs here, above that level, it opens up to the 43.50 level.
Let's just finish with the overall market thoughts here because we've obviously, like we've said at the beginning of the show, we've had a pretty significant overnight range getting as low as 1507 before Warren came on CNBC and we kind of had a Warren rally. Now we're trading 1515. We're only down $1.50. Are people going to look at this and say, oh, we were significantly lower overnight here and I'm going to take, if I've held some positions overnight here, maybe you take this open that we are going to open relatively flat and look to, dump into that open? Or are they going to come in with their buying shoes and just continue to buy this thing back up to the 1520 area?
We've been bouncing pretty good between 1520 and 1500. So let's just look at that. You look at Friday's high, 1519 even as resistance. Even though we did pop through it on Thursday, we went to 1524.50. You had another high to 1519 and a quarter on Wednesday. So that's your first resistance point. And then 1524.50, we hit that level twice last week. So if you do bust through these levels, I mean, you're just going to be running into more resistance points. So I guess I'd be more apt to try and, short around the $19 area and look to come in. If we're pulling back on the downside, you got minor support here at the close, or we're actually below the close. Thursday's close was 1513 and a quarter. That's going to be your minor support area. And major support at 1507, which was the overnight low.
That's our show for today, guys. Have a great trading day, and we will be back with you tomorrow.